Hello, and thank you for tuning in today. I'm thankful that you have decided to join us, and I pray that your lives will be encouraged and blessed by the message today. As I was thinking of this message that I wanted to present today, I began to think of perspective. What is our perspective? I thought about the glass being half full or half empty. Sometimes I think in our nation today, we have a tendency to look at the world through the glass is half empty side of things. I want to encourage you to think maybe there's a better way to look at things. Today, with the coronavirus going around and all of the struggles and the problems that is bringing, it sometimes overwhelms us. It sometimes causes us to be flustered, maybe fearful. I want you to think about something. What if God was in control of all things? What if He had the ability to save us, to guide us, to direct us, to give us wisdom? I was thinking about this, and my son brought up a video that he had showed me one time of a group of basketball players. At the beginning of the video, it says, "Count how many times the basketball is passed between players." As the players are throwing the ball around, you're watching them and you're counting. At the end, the video stops and it says, "Did you see the dancing bear?" And my thought was, no, I didn't see any dancing bear there. That's impossible. But I backed it up and I watched the video again, and sure enough, right through the middle of the basketball players, in the middle of the tossing the ball around, there was a bear that walked right through the middle of the scene. And I hadn't even seen it because my perspective, what I was looking for was how many times the ball had been passed. And I completely missed the dancing bear. That's kind of a silly illustration, but it kind of helps you to get the picture that sometimes our perspective is off. We miss what's important. Today, with the coronavirus going around, we have a lot of fear. There's a lot of anxiety, a lot of things that come about that are maybe a domino effect from the virus itself. Our finances and other things in the world, the jobs, all of these things trouble us and they cause us to have fear. But what if we could refocus that? What if we could get the focus back on trusting and believing in God? I was reading through the book of Exodus this last week, and as I did, I read about how God delivered His people through Moses and Aaron, and He provided for them a way out of the slavery that they were in. Think with me for a moment. He delivered them from slavery by presenting against the Egyptians all of these different plagues, 10 different plagues that the Israelites, did not have to go through. They were spared those, but the Egyptians went through them. Why would that have happened? For the purpose of helping them to see that God is powerful and He is able to deliver. I think that's an important part of the message. As He delivered them out of Egypt, the Pharaoh changed his mind and came after them. As the Israelites saw the Egyptians coming towards them, they became fearful. And they said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die?" This same sentiment is repeated over and over again as they wandered in the wilderness. Why? Because their perspective was on the fear. Instead of putting their perspective and their trust in God, they were looking at the fear that they had. And different things caused them to be afraid. As they went into the desert, they were afraid of not having enough water, but God provided for them fresh water. They were afraid of not having enough food, but God provided manna and quail for them to eat right at their doorstep. They were afraid that their clothes would wear out or sandals, but God caused them to last the whole time that they were in the desert, 40 years. All of these things and more God did. He showed them that he was able. He gave them an example of his power and his might. There was something else that happened. As they began to fear, they began to do things that were contrary to God's will. You see, they built an altar and they sacrificed to a calf that they had made with their own hands and covered with gold. And they said, "This is the God that led us up out of Egypt." Why? Because they were afraid. As they went through the wilderness, they doubted God and whether or not that he could deliver them. Even with all of the things that he did, leading him through the river, through the Red Sea, the Jordan River was parted just as the Red Sea was. And all of these things, he showed his power and that he was with them. And yet, when they came to the edge of the land that God had promised them, they decided to send spies into the land to find out what it was like. When they came back, 10 of the 12 reported that it was scary. It was a great land, beautiful, many crops, wonderful produce. But no, the men there were like giants, and we were like grasshoppers in their eyes, because they allowed fear to dominate them instead of putting their trust in God. Because of that, God allowed them to wander in the wilderness for the next 40 years. And during that time, he continually delivered them. He continually provided ways for them to eat, drink, all of the things that they needed. And he protected them and watched over them. But he allowed those original generation to pass on. And the new generation was ready to enter into the land. And those that had experienced it represented the truth that God was powerful, that he was able to deliver. And they encouraged the people. And when they were ready, God parted the Jordan and they walked across on dry land. They came to a city of Jericho that was well fortified with a great wall. And they marched around the city and they obeyed what God told them to do. It didn't make sense. It wasn't something that you could practically believe in. But they believed and trusted in God. And after doing that for 7 days, on the seventh day, God brought the walls down. It wasn't because of anything they had done, but because of what God had done. The trust that they had saw them through at that point. It wasn't the end of their troubles. They had more doubts. They had more struggles. They disobeyed. They went against God's will multiple times. But God continued to bring them back. And they continued to put their trust and faith in him overall. And because of that, they were able to conquer the whole land, just as God had promised. And the people fled before them because they knew that God was powerful. He was able to do all of these things. What does that have to do with us? How does it apply to us today? I want you to think for a moment. We hear on the news every day about the coronavirus. I looked at the news today to see what the statistics were. It said there was 26,000 people who had died from the coronavirus. Sometimes we focus on that, and it becomes so much that we forget that there were 550,000 people that went home from the hospitals. Safe, okay, healthy. We might also forget that there are 7 million others who have not even been attacked by the virus. But sometimes we focus on the scary things, the fearful things, and we forget that God is in control of all things. And sometimes we might lose that focus and we might lose our faith. I want you to think about the perspective that you have. Where are you at? What is your perspective today? Are you looking at things and seeing God's power, His might, His abilities, His love, His grace, His mercy. All of those things that the Israelites saw and learned of God, we have today. But there's more. He also sent His Son to die for us. And because He did, we have the promise of eternal life. We also get the benefit of the peace that comes with knowing Him. And we have the promises that He's given us, that if we follow Him, He will deliver us. He will save us. We have the same promises, the same benefits the Egyptians did. But sometimes we lose that perspective. We forget that He is in control. And because of that, we lose all perspective of who and what is important. I want to encourage you this week, as we go forth into the new week, to change your perspective, to not look at the cup as being half empty, but rather look at it as being half full, and see that yes, there are trials, there are struggles. We are having problems from time to time, and there may be losses. I do not want to belittle the losses of those who have gone, who have died. I don't want us to feel like that they were unimportant, because they are very important to God and to us. But I want you to see that there's such a bigger picture. There's so much more to see. And if we don't spend our time focusing on the fear, focusing on the troubles, but rather look at what God can and has done, maybe we can see clearly to share the good news with others, that they could have the same ability, to have the same faith, to be able to put their trust in God and not in their own abilities. So my encouragement to you today is to let go of the burdens, let go of the fear, let go of the control that Satan has over you, and allow God to be in control. Put your trust, put your faith, put your hope in Him, and no longer focus on those fearful things, but on the things that God has promised us. I pray that God will give you a wonderful week and that He will bless you greatly. Thank you all for tuning in.